The wagon wheel hit another rut in the dusty trail, and Penelope Hartford's hand instinctively went to the false bottom beneath her seat, where $3,000 in stolen bank notes lay hidden alongside a wanted poster bearing someone else's face, but describing crimes she had witnessed. The late afternoon sun of July 1882 beat down mercilessly on the Colorado landscape as she guided her two horses toward what she hoped would be sanctuary. Pueblo lay somewhere ahead, a town she had never seen but had chosen from a tattered map because it was far enough from Kansas City and the men who would kill her if they knew what she carried. The weight of the secret pressed on her chest with every breath, making the summer heat feel even more suffocating. She was 23 years old, and 3 weeks ago she had been a bookkeeper in a respectable freight company until the night she stayed late and overheard her employer and his associates planning a robbery that would blame an innocent man. Penelope had taken the evidence, the money they had already stolen from a previous job, and disappeared into the night. It was the most reckless thing she had ever done, but watching them frame Jonathan Mitchell, a clerk with a wife and 3 children, had ignited something fierce inside her. She could not stand by while an innocent man hanged. So she had grabbed what she could, left a note for the sheriff that she prayed he would believe, and run. The horses whinnied, pulling her from her thoughts. A rider was approaching from the east, moving fast. Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs as she considered urging her team to greater speed, but that would only draw attention. She kept her pace steady, her hands tight on the reins, and watched the rider close the distance between them. He was tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun, and he rode with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his entire life on horseback. As he drew alongside her wagon, he slowed his horse to match her pace. Penelope kept her eyes forward, but she could feel his gaze on her. "Afternoon, miss," he called out, his voice deep and carrying a warmth that surprised her. "You heading into Pueblo?" She risked a glance at him and found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. His face was sun-weathered and strong, with a jawline that suggested both stubbornness and determination. He looked to be in his late 20s, and there was something about the way he sat his horse that spoke of capability. "I am," she replied, keeping her voice level despite her racing pulse. "Is it much farther?" "About 2 hours at your current pace," he said, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You traveling alone?" Penelope stiffened. "I can manage on my own, thank you." He held up a hand in a peaceable gesture. "Did not mean any offense, miss. Just that this stretch of trail can be rough for anyone traveling solo. Name's Donovan Irving. I run a horse ranch about 5 miles outside Pueblo." She debated whether to give him her real name and decided that, in this vast territory, it was unlikely anyone would connect her to Kansas City. "Penelope Hartford. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Hartford." He tipped his hat, and she noticed that his hands were calloused and strong. "You planning on settling in Pueblo or just passing through?" "I have not decided yet," she said truthfully. "I am looking for work and a fresh start." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "Fresh start, huh? Pueblo's a good place for that. Growing town, lots of opportunity. What kind of work are you looking for?" "I have experience with bookkeeping and accounts," Penelope said. "I can read and write well, and I know my numbers." Donovan nodded thoughtfully. "The mercantile might need help. Old Mr. Peterson has been complaining about his ledgers for months, and the hotel always needs staff." He paused, then added, "My ranch could use someone with a head for figures too. I am better with horses than I am with account books." She looked at him sharply, searching for any hint of impropriety in the offer, but his expression was sincere. "That is kind of you, Mr. Irving, but I would not want to impose." "Not an imposition if I am offering," he said. "And call me Donovan. We are not so formal out here." He gestured at the landscape around them. "Tell you what, why do not I ride with you into town, make sure you get settled somewhere safe? Then tomorrow, if you want, you can come out to the ranch and take a look at the books. No obligation. If you decide it is not for you, I will point you toward other opportunities in town." Penelope wanted to refuse. She had learned in the hardest way possible that trusting people could be dangerous. But something in Donovan Irving's straightforward manner made her want to believe he was genuine. Besides, having someone known in the community vouch for her could help her establish herself more quickly. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you for your kindness." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves on the hard, packed earth. Penelope found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. There was something solid about Donovan Irving, something that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. "So what brings you all the way out to Colorado?" he asked after a time. "You sound like you are from back east." "Missouri originally," she said, which was true enough. She had been born in St. Louis before her family moved to Kansas. "I needed a change of scenery." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "I came out here 6 years ago from Texas. My father died and left me a small inheritance. I used it to buy land and start breeding horses. It has been hard work, but I have built something I am proud of." "That must be satisfying," Penelope said, and she meant it. She had never had the opportunity to build something of her own. Her life had always been about survival, about making herself useful enough to keep her position but invisible enough to avoid unwanted attention. "It is," Donovan agreed. "There is something about working with horses that is honest. They do not lie or cheat or pretend to be something they are not. You treat them right, they treat you right." He glanced at her. "I try to run my ranch the same way. Fair wages for fair work, and everyone gets treated with respect." Penelope felt a pang of longing for that kind of simplicity. "That sounds like a good way to do business." "Only way, far as I am concerned," Donovan said firmly. "My father always told me that a man's word was his bond, and if you could not keep your word, you were not worth much." He shifted in his saddle. "I try to live by that." They crested a rise, and suddenly Pueblo spread out before them in the valley below. It was larger than Penelope had expected, with several streets of buildings, church spires rising against the sky, and the Arkansas River gleaming in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys and forges, and even from this distance she could hear the faint sounds of activity. "There she is," Donovan said with unmistakable pride in his voice. "Not as big as Denver, but she is growing. We have got 2 newspapers, 3 hotels, more saloons than we probably need, and some of the best ranching country in Colorado surrounding us." "It looks wonderful," Penelope said softly, and she meant it. This could be home. This could be where she finally stopped running. They made their way down into town as the sun began its descent toward the mountains in the west. The streets were busy with people finishing their daily business. Cowboys rode past, their horses kicking up dust. Women in practical dresses carried baskets from the mercantile. Children played in the spaces between buildings, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Donovan led her to a modest but well-maintained hotel called the Arkansas Rose. "Mrs. Chen runs this place," he explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "She is fair with her prices and keeps a respectable establishment. Tell her I sent you." Penelope felt the loss of his steadying hand as soon as she was on solid ground. She brushed the dust from her skirts and looked up at him, still mounted on his horse. "Thank you, Mr. Irving." "Donovan." You have been very kind to a stranger. Like I said, we are not so formal out here, he replied with a smile that transformed his serious face into something warmer. I will be back in town tomorrow around 10. If you are interested in looking at those books, I will be at the livery stable on 3rd Street. I will think about it, Penelope said, though she already knew she would go. She needed work, and something told her that Donovan Irving was a man she could trust. He tipped his hat to her once more and rode off, leaving her standing beside her wagon with its hidden secrets. She watched him go, then turned to face the hotel and her uncertain future. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a sharp-eyed Chinese woman in her 50s who looked Penelope up and down with frank assessment before quoting a fair price for a room. "You pay by the week in advance," she said in slightly accented but perfectly clear English. "No men in the rooms, no loud noise after 9, and breakfast is included. Donovan Irving vouched for you. He was kind enough to guide me into town," Penelope said, counting out coins from her carefully hoarded legitimate money. She would not touch the stolen bills except in dire emergency. "Donovan is a good man," Mrs. Chen said approvingly. "Honest, hard worker. You could do worse if you are looking for employment." She handed Penelope a key. "Room 7, 2nd floor. You need help with your trunk. I can manage, thank you." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. Penelope waited until Mrs. Chen's footsteps had retreated down the hall before she went back out to her wagon. Her hands shook slightly as she removed the false bottom and retrieved the oilcloth bundle that contained the money and papers. She carried it inside, her heart pounding, and stashed it under the mattress. It was not a perfect hiding place, but it would do until she could find something better. That night, Penelope lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Pueblo settling in for the night. Somewhere a piano played, and she could hear laughter and conversation from the saloons. Closer by, footsteps creaked on the floorboards, and the building groaned as it cooled from the day's heat. She thought about Donovan Irving and his offer of work. She thought about the way he had looked at her, frank and open, with none of the calculation she had learned to expect from men. She thought about his words, fresh start, honest, your word is your bond. What would he think if he knew what she carried? Would he still look at her with those clear blue eyes, or would he turn away in disgust? Penelope rolled onto her side and stared at the wall. She had done what she did to save an innocent man. The money was evidence, and she had every intention of getting it to the authorities once she was certain she could do so safely. But would anyone believe that? Or would they just see a thief? Sleep came eventually, fitful and troubled, and when she woke, the sun was already brightening her window. She washed and dressed carefully, choosing her most practical dress and pinning her dark hair back in a neat bun. If she was going to look at ranch accounts, she needed to look professional. At precisely 10 o'clock, she made her way to the livery stable on 3rd Street. Her stomach fluttered with nervousness that had nothing to do with the job and everything to do with seeing Donovan again. He was waiting for her, leaning against the stable wall in conversation with a man she did not recognize. When he saw her approaching, his face lit up with a smile that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Hartford," he said, straightening, "I am glad you came. This is Tom Bradshaw. He runs the livery." Tom was a burly man with graying hair and a friendly face. "Pleased to meet you, miss. Donovan here has been talking up your skills with numbers. I hope I can live up to his recommendation," Penelope said. "I have got my wagon ready," Donovan said. "If you are willing, we can head out to the ranch now. It is about an hour's ride." Penelope nodded, and soon she was seated beside Donovan on his wagon, heading out of town on a well-maintained road that ran southwest through rolling grassland. The morning was already warm, promising another hot day, but a breeze kept it from being oppressive. "Tell me about your ranch," Penelope said, partly because she was genuinely curious and partly because she wanted to hear his voice. "The rocking eye," Donovan said, and she could hear the pride in his tone. "I've got about 500 acres, most of it good grazing land. I run cattle too, but horses are my real passion. I breed working horses, the kind that ranchers and farmers need. Steady, smart, strong. Nothing fancy but good solid animals. How many horses do you have right now?" "About 40 head plus a dozen cattle. I have got 2 men who work for me full-time, Miguel and his son Carlos. Miguel's wife, Rosa, cooks and helps with the household. They are good people, been with me for 3 years now." As they rode, Donovan pointed out landmarks and told her about the area. He spoke with the easy knowledge of someone who had made this place his own, who knew every hill and creek and stand of trees. Penelope found herself relaxing, drawn in by his enthusiasm and the obvious love he had for the land. The ranch, when they reached it, was more impressive than she had expected. The house was a solid structure of wood and stone, clearly built to last. A barn stood nearby, large and well-maintained, and she could see horses in the corral, their coats gleaming in the sun. Beyond the main buildings, she spotted a bunkhouse and what looked like a smokehouse. A man emerged from the barn as they pulled up, wiping his hands on his trousers. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair and the weathered face of someone who worked outdoors. "Boss," he said with a nod, then turned curious eyes to Penelope. "Miguel, this is Miss Penelope Hartford. She's going to take a look at our books, see if she can make sense of them. Miss Hartford, this is Miguel Hernandez. He is my foreman and the best hand with horses I have ever seen." "Pleased to meet you, sir," Penelope said. Miguel's face broke into a warm smile. "The pleasure is mine, señorita, and please call me Miguel. We do not stand on formality here." He shot Donovan a teasing look. The boss, he tries to keep good records, but numbers are not his strength. "I can add just fine," Donovan protested. "I just do not always remember to write things down." Miguel laughed. "This is true. Come, señorita, I will introduce you to Rosa. She will want to feed you. She always wants to feed everyone." Rosa Hernandez turned out to be a plump, kind-faced woman, who immediately insisted that Penelope must have something to eat before she did any work. The ranch house kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of baking bread, and Penelope found herself seated at a sturdy wooden table with a cup of coffee and a plate of fresh tortillas while Rosa bustled about, talking cheerfully about the ranch and how happy she was that someone was finally going to help with the accounts. "The boss, he is a good man," Rosa said, patting Penelope's hand, "but he needs a woman's touch around here. This house, it is too empty for one man alone." "Rosa," Donovan said warningly from the doorway, but there was affection in his tone. "What? I speak only the truth." Rosa gave Penelope a significant look. "You have a husband, señorita?" "No," Penelope said, feeling her cheeks warm. "I am not married." "Ah," Rosa said with satisfaction, as if this confirmed something she had suspected. "Well, you have come to the right place then. Colorado is full of good men looking for good wives." "Rosa, leave Miss Hartford alone," Donovan said, but he was trying not to smile. "She came here to look at ledgers, not to listen to your matchmaking." "I can do both," Rosa replied serenely. Despite her embarrassment, Penelope found herself laughing. There was something so warm and welcoming about the Hernandez family, about this whole place, that it was impossible not to feel at ease. After she had eaten, Donovan led her to a small office off the main room of the house. It was clearly a workspace, with a desk covered in papers, shelves holding various supplies, and a large ledger book lying open with entries in Donovan's bold, slightly uneven handwriting. "I apologize for the mess," he said, looking genuinely chagrined. "I keep meaning to organize it, but something always comes up." Penelope approached the desk and began to look through the papers. Invoices for feed and supplies, receipts for horses sold, notes about veterinary visits and breeding schedules. It was chaotic, but as she sorted through it, she began to see the outline of a successful operation. "This is not bad," she said after a few minutes. "You have kept more records than you think. They just need to be organized and entered into the ledger properly. Can you do it?" Donovan asked, and there was something almost boyish in his hopefulness. "Yes," Penelope said, "but it will take some time. You have several months of entries to catch up on." "I could pay you 50 cents a day," Donovan said, "and Rosa will feed you lunch. If you need to stay late, I can drive you back to town, or you could stay for dinner too." 50 cents a day was fair wages, more than fair for this kind of work. Penelope nodded. "That would be acceptable. When would you like me to start? How about right now?" Donovan said with a grin. "Unless you have other obligations." "No," Penelope said softly. "I have nowhere else I need to be." Something passed between them in that moment, a current of understanding that made Penelope's breath catch. Donovan held her gaze for a long heartbeat, and she saw in his eyes a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "Good," he said finally. "Then welcome to the Rocking Eye, Miss Hartford. I have a feeling you are going to fit right in." He left her to her work, and Penelope settled into the chair behind the desk. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with fear or flight. She organized the papers into stacks, opened the ledger to a fresh page, and began the careful work of bringing order to chaos. Hours passed without her noticing. She was deep in concentration, tracking down a discrepancy in the feed bills when a shadow fell across the desk. She looked up to find Donovan standing there with 2 glasses of water. "Rosa says if you do not take a break, she's going to come in here and drag you outside herself," he said, setting one glass beside her. Penelope blinked and realized her back was stiff and her hand ached from writing. The light coming through the window had shifted, suggesting it was well into the afternoon. "I did not realize how much time had passed." "That is the sign of someone who loves their work," Donovan said. He pulled up a chair and sat down, his movements easy and relaxed. "How are you managing?" "Better than expected," Penelope said, accepting the water gratefully. "Your records are actually quite good once I sorted through them. You have a profitable operation here, Donovan." He looked pleased. "Profitable enough to keep growing, I hope." "I have been thinking about expanding the horse breeding program, maybe getting into training as well as selling young stock." They talked about the ranch, about his plans and dreams, and Penelope found herself offering suggestions, her mind already working through the financial implications. It felt good to use her skills, to be valued for her mind rather than just her ability to be quiet and invisible. "You have a real head for this," Donovan said after she had outlined a potential expansion plan. "I am lucky you came to Pueblo." "I am the lucky one," Penelope said before she could stop herself. "You have given me an opportunity when you had no reason to trust me." Donovan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "I trust my instincts, and my instincts say you are exactly who you appear to be. An honest woman looking for an honest chance." Guilt twisted in Penelope's stomach. She wanted desperately to be that woman, but she was carrying secrets that could put them all in danger. She looked down at her hands, at the ink stains on her fingers. "What if your instincts are wrong, are they?" Donovan asked quietly. She looked up at him, and for a wild moment she wanted to tell him everything. About the money, about the men she was running from, about the fear that woke her in the night. But the words stuck in her throat. How could she burden him with her troubles when he had shown her nothing but kindness? "No," she said finally. "I am exactly what I seem. A woman who wants to work hard and build a new life." It was not quite a lie, she told herself. It was just not the complete truth. "Then that is good enough for me," Donovan said. He stood up, stretching his tall frame. "Come on. Rosa will have dinner ready soon, and you should see the horses before the light goes. I have got a new colt that is going to be something special." The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. Donovan showed her around the ranch, introducing her to his horses with the same care he might use to introduce her to members of his family. Each horse had a name and a personality, and it was clear he knew and cared for them all individually. The new colt was indeed beautiful, a leggy bay with intelligent eyes and a curious nature. He came right up to the fence to investigate Penelope, snuffling at her hands in search of treats. "That is Ranger," Donovan said, rubbing the colt's forehead affectionately. "He has got the best bloodlines on the ranch. His sire was a cavalry horse, his dam is pure Spanish stock. When he is grown and trained, he will be worth a lot of money." "Are you going to sell him?" Penelope asked, watching the way Donovan's hands gentled the young horse. "Maybe, if the right buyer comes along, or maybe I will keep him for breeding." Donovan looked at her over the colt's neck. "Sometimes you find something too good to let go." There was something in the way he said it that made Penelope think he was not just talking about horses. Dinner was a lively affair. Carlos, Miguel's 17-year-old son, joined them, and the conversation flowed easily between English and Spanish. They talked about the horses, about the upcoming roundup, about events in town. Penelope found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn into the warm circle of this makeshift family. When Donovan finally drove her back to town under a sky full of stars, Penelope felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. "Same time tomorrow?" Donovan asked as he helped her down from the wagon in front of the hotel. "Yes," Penelope said. "I will be ready." His hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Sleep well, Miss Hartford." "Penelope," she said impulsively. "Please call me Penelope." His smile was warm even in the darkness. "Penelope, that is a pretty name. Good night." She watched him drive away, then made her way up to her room. The bundle under her mattress seemed to mock her happiness, a reminder that she was not as free as she wanted to be. But as she lay in bed that night, she found herself thinking not about what she was running from, but about what she might be running toward. About blue eyes and calloused hands and a voice that made her feel safe. About a ranch in the Colorado grassland where horses ran free and the people treated her with kindness. Maybe, just maybe, she could have the fresh start she had been dreaming of. The days fell into a pattern. Each morning, Donovan would pick her up at the hotel, and they would ride out to the ranch together. Penelope would work on the accounts while Donovan and his men handled the endless tasks that came with running a ranch. At lunch, they would all eat together in the kitchen, and Rosa would pile Penelope's plate high while asking increasingly pointed questions about her personal life. In the evenings, Donovan would show her something new about the ranch, or they would sit on the porch and talk while the sun set. Penelope found herself living for those conversations. Donovan was easy to talk to, with opinions on everything from politics to poetry, and he listened to her thoughts with genuine interest. He told her about growing up in Texas, about his father's death, and his decision to start over in Colorado. She told him carefully edited stories about her own past, leaving out the parts that mattered most. The work on the accounts progressed quickly. Within a week, she had caught up on all the backlog and implemented a new system that would make record-keeping much simpler going forward. Donovan praised her efforts so warmly that she felt herself blushing, and Miguel declared that she was a miracle worker. It was Rosa, however, who seemed most pleased with her presence. "The boss, he smiles more now," she told Penelope one afternoon while they were preparing vegetables together. "He was too serious before, too alone. A man needs a woman to share his life with." "We are just friends," Penelope protested, but even to her own ears the words sounded weak. Rosa gave her a knowing look. "Friends, yes, for now, but I see how he looks at you, Mija. And I see how you look at him when you think no one is watching." Penelope could not deny it. She was falling for Donovan Irving, falling hard and fast in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. Every smile he gave her felt like a gift. Every casual touch, his hand on her elbow or his fingers brushing hers when he passed her something, sent electricity through her body. When he laughed at something she said, her heart felt like it might burst from happiness. But always, lurking in the back of her mind, was the knowledge of what she was hiding. The money under her mattress felt like an anchor, weighing her down even as she tried to soar. 3 weeks into her employment at the Rocking Eye, a stranger rode into the ranch yard. Penelope was in the office, working on projections for the fall horse sales, when she heard raised voices outside. Her blood went cold. She stood and moved to the window, peering out carefully. The stranger was a hard-looking man with a drooping mustache and guns worn low on his hips. He sat his horse with the lazy confidence of someone used to getting his way. Donovan stood in the yard, his posture tense, and even from a distance, Penelope could see the wariness in his stance. She could not hear what they were saying, but she saw the stranger pull a piece of paper from his coat and show it to Donovan. Her heart nearly stopped. Was it a wanted poster? Had they found her already? Miguel and Carlos emerged from the barn, and the stranger's hand dropped to his gun. Donovan said something sharp, and the situation seemed to diffuse slightly. The stranger put the paper away, tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy, and rode off. Penelope's legs felt weak. She sank back into the chair, her mind racing. She had to leave. She had to leave right now before she brought more danger to these good people. The office door opened and Donovan came in. His face was troubled. "We need to talk." "Who was that man?" Penelope asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A bounty hunter," Donovan said. He pulled the chair around and sat down facing her, his knees almost touching hers. "He is looking for a woman who ran away from Kansas City with stolen money. He had a description that could fit about half the women in Colorado, but he is riding around to all the ranches asking questions." Penelope felt like she might be sick. "What did you tell him?" "That I had not seen anyone matching that description," Donovan said. His blue eyes were steady on hers. "Penelope, is there something you need to tell me?" She wanted to lie. She wanted to protect herself, to maintain the fiction she had built. But looking into his honest face, she could not do it anymore. "Yes," she whispered, "but it is not what you think. I am not a thief, at least not the way he believes." Donovan reached out and took her hands in his. His grip was warm and strong. "Then tell me the truth, and we will figure this out together." And so she did. The words came tumbling out in a rush. She told him about her job in Kansas City, about the night she overheard her employer planning to frame Jonathan Mitchell for a robbery. She told him about taking the money and the evidence, about leaving a note for the sheriff, about running because she was terrified of what those men would do to her if they found out what she knew. "I have been planning to send the evidence to the authorities in Kansas City once I felt safe enough," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I was so scared, Donovan. Those men, they would kill me without a second thought. I just wanted to save an innocent man, and now I am the one being hunted." When she finished, she waited for him to pull his hands away, to tell her to leave. Instead, he squeezed her fingers gently. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm. You did the right thing. A hard thing, a brave thing, but the right thing, and you are not going to face this alone. I should leave, Penelope said desperately. I should not have come here. I am putting you all in danger. You are not going anywhere, Donovan said. Not unless you want to. But if you want to stay, if you want to fight this, then I am going to help you. Why? Penelope asked. Why would you do that for me? Donovan reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. The tenderness of the gesture made her want to cry harder. Because you are one of the most remarkable women I have ever met. Because you are brave and honest and kind. Because in the 3 weeks I have known you, you have made my life better in about 100 different ways. He paused, then said softly, and because I am falling in love with you, Penelope Hartford. I think I have been since the moment you tried to pretend you did not need help on that trail. Donovan, she breathed, her heart feeling too big for her chest. You do not have to say anything back, he said quickly. I know this is a lot, and you have got enough on your plate without me adding to it, but I want you to know that you have got people here who care about you, who will stand with you. Penelope leaned forward and kissed him. It was impulsive and probably foolish, but she could not help herself. His lips were warm and gentle, and when his arms came around her, she felt safer than she had in her entire life. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Donovan rested his forehead against hers. Okay then, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. Okay. I love you too, Penelope whispered. I did not want to, I was trying so hard not to, but I do. They sat there for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Donovan pulled back, his expression becoming businesslike. All right. First thing we need to do is get that evidence to the proper authorities. Not the local sheriff in Kansas City, he might be compromised. We need to go higher. The federal marshal, maybe. There is a marshal's office in Denver, Penelope said. I looked into it before I left Kansas, but I was too frightened to go directly there. Denver is 2 days' ride, Donovan said thoughtfully. We could take the train, be there and back in less than a week. Penelope asked. You think I am letting you go alone? Not a chance. Donovan stood, pulling her to her feet. Go get the money and whatever other evidence you have. Bring it back here. We will put it in my safe until we are ready to leave. Are you certain? Penelope asked. This could ruin you if anyone finds out you are helping me. Let me worry about that, Donovan said. Now go before that bounty hunter decides to come back and ask more questions. The ride back to town felt longer than usual, even though Donovan pushed the horses harder than normal. Penelope's mind was whirling. He loved her. He was going to help her. Maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. At the hotel, she hurried up to her room, retrieved the oilcloth bundle from under the mattress, and wrapped it in a clean shawl. Mrs. Chen gave her a curious look when she came back down carrying the bundle, but said nothing. On the return trip to the ranch, Donovan outlined his plan. We will leave for Denver in 2 days. That will give me time to make arrangements for Miguel to handle things here. We will take the afternoon train, get a hotel in Denver, and meet with the marshal first thing the next morning. What if he does not believe me? Penelope asked. Then we will make him believe you, Donovan said firmly. You have got evidence, you have got a clear story, and you have got no reason to lie. And if that is not enough, I will vouch for your character. Back at the ranch, they put the bundle in Donovan's safe, a heavy iron box built into the wall of his bedroom. As he locked it securely, Penelope felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The secret was no longer hers alone. That evening, Donovan called Miguel and Rosa into the house and explained the situation. Penelope watched their faces anxiously, waiting for judgment or condemnation. Instead, Rosa came around the table and wrapped Penelope in a fierce hug. You poor girl, she said. Carrying this burden all alone. But you are not alone anymore, you understand. Miguel nodded gravely. The boss is right. We stand together. If anyone comes looking for trouble, they will find more than they bargained for. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Donovan arranged for Miguel to oversee the ranch operations in his absence. Rosa packed them enough food for the journey, insisting they would starve if left to their own devices. Carlos, who turned out to be an excellent shot, stationed himself as a lookout in case the bounty hunter returned. Penelope spent the time organizing all the evidence, writing out a detailed statement of everything she had witnessed and done. She included dates, names, descriptions, every detail she could remember. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. The night before they were set to leave, Penelope could not sleep. She stood on the porch of the ranch house, looking out at the moonlit landscape. The summer night was warm, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant call of an owl. She heard the door open behind her and then Donovan's footsteps. He came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly, about going to Denver? No. Penelope turned to look at him. About bringing all of this down on your head. Constantly. Donovan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. You did not bring anything down on my head. You just gave me a chance to do something that matters, to help someone who deserves it, he smiled. Besides, life was getting a little boring, nothing but horses and cattle and paperwork. She laughed despite herself. Boring sounds wonderful right about now. Boring is what we will get back to, Donovan promised, just as soon as we clear your name. He hesitated, then asked, After that, what do you want? Have you thought about it? I want to stay here, Penelope said without hesitation. If you will have me, I want to work on the ranch, help it grow. I want dinners with Rosa and Miguel making terrible jokes and Carlos showing off his roping skills. I want to watch the sun rise over the grassland and fall asleep to the sound of the horses. She paused, gathering her courage. I want to be with you. Donovan pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heart beating, strong and steady. Your wagon carried secrets from your past, he said softly. But your future starts right here with me if you want it, if you will have me. Penelope looked up at him, at his dear, serious face silvered by moonlight. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Penelope felt like she was finally, truly home. The next morning they set out for Pueblo to catch the afternoon train to Denver. Penelope wore her best dress, and Donovan was dressed in town clothes rather than his usual work gear. He looked unfamiliar in a proper coat and tie, but no less handsome. The train ride was Penelope's first, and despite her nervousness about what lay ahead, she could not help but be fascinated by the landscape rushing past the window. Donovan sat beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the places they passed. They arrived in Denver as evening was falling. The city was much larger than Pueblo, with electric lights beginning to glow along the main streets. Donovan secured them rooms at a respectable hotel, 2 separate rooms with a careful propriety that made Penelope love him even more. That night, they had dinner in the hotel restaurant, and Donovan reached across the table to take her hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. All right, Penelope agreed. The next morning, they made their way to the federal marshal's office. It was an imposing building near the courthouse, and Penelope felt her courage wavering as they climbed the steps. Donovan squeezed her hand. You can do this. The marshal who met with them was a weathered man in his 50s named James Carter. He listened to Penelope's story with a poker face that gave nothing away, examining the evidence she had brought with careful attention. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied her. That is quite a story, Miss Hartford. It is the truth, Penelope said, lifting her chin. I believe you, Marshall Carter said, and Penelope felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. I have been investigating the organization you are describing for over a year. They have been operating in Kansas City and other locations, using legitimate businesses as fronts for their activities. Your evidence here, this could be the break we need to bring them down. What about the bounty hunter? Donovan asked. The one who is looking for her, hired by the criminals, not operating with any legal authority, the marshal said with obvious disgust. I will send word to have him brought in for questioning. Miss Hartford, you may still be called upon to testify when this goes to trial, but you have my word that you will be protected. And the innocent man who was framed, I will personally ensure he is exonerated. Penelope could barely speak past the lump in her throat. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marshall Carter said. What you did took real courage. Not many people would risk themselves for a stranger. They emerged from the marshal's office into brilliant sunshine. Penelope felt light-headed with relief. It was over. The burden she had been carrying for so long was finally lifted. Donovan swept her into his arms right there on the street, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, his eyes were shining. You did it. I am so proud of you. We did it, Penelope corrected. I could not have done this without you. They spent the rest of the day exploring Denver, celebrating their success. Donovan bought her a new hat with ribbons, and she insisted on buying him a book of poetry he had been admiring in a shop window. They ate dinner at a fancy restaurant and talked about their plans for the future. I want to expand the breeding program, Donovan said. With your help managing the finances, I think we could really make the Rocking Eye into something special. I have been thinking about that, Penelope said. What if we also offered boarding and training services? There are a lot of people who need good horses worked with, and you have the skills. It could be a steady source of income while we build up the breeding stock. Donovan's face lit up. That is brilliant. We could start small, just a few horses at a time, and see how it goes. Penelope said softly. I like the sound of that. Get used to it, Donovan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Because I plan on making it permanent as soon as you will let me. Penelope's heart skipped a beat. Donovan Irving, is that a proposal? He flushed slightly but held her gaze. Not yet. I want to do it properly with a ring and everything. But it is a promise that one is coming if you are willing to wait for it. I will wait, Penelope said, squeezing his fingers. But not too long. They returned to Pueblo 3 days later, triumphant and full of plans. Rosa cried when they told her the news, and Miguel insisted they celebrate with a special dinner. Even Carlos seemed pleased, though he tried to hide it behind teenage stoicism. Life settled back into a rhythm, but everything felt different now. Penelope moved out of the hotel and into a small cottage on the ranch property that had previously been used for storage. With Rosa's help, she cleaned it up and made it into a proper home, with curtains on the windows and flowers in pots by the door. The account work expanded as they implemented the new training program. Penelope found herself not just keeping books, but actively managing the business side of the ranch. She negotiated with suppliers, corresponded with potential clients, and developed a system for tracking each horse's progress through training. The ranch prospered. Word spread about the quality of Donovan's work, and soon they had more business than they could handle. They hired another hand, a young man named Frank who had a gift for gentling even the most difficult horses. The bank account grew steadily, and Donovan began talking seriously about buying adjacent land to expand their operations. Through it all, Penelope and Donovan grew closer. They spent their evenings together, sometimes working on ranch business, sometimes just talking. Donovan taught her to ride better, and she taught him to keep proper records without complaining. They went to church socials together, and Penelope was gradually accepted into the community as Donovan's intended. In October, 4 months after she had first arrived in Pueblo, Donovan asked her to go for a ride with him. They headed up into the hills behind the ranch as the aspens were turning gold. He led her to a high point that looked out over the valley, where the ranch spread below them like a patchwork quilt. "I love this view," Donovan said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "Sometimes when things get tough, I come up here to remind myself what I am working for." "It is beautiful," Penelope agreed. "It is," Donovan said, but he was looking at her, not the view. He took her hands in his. "Penelope Hartford, I have been waiting to do this properly, and I figure 4 months is long enough. You rode into my life on a dusty trail with secrets and fear, but also with courage and strength and the kindest heart I have ever known. You have made me happier than I ever thought I could be. You have made the ranch a home instead of just a place to work. And I cannot imagine spending another day without knowing you are going to be by my side for the rest of my life." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a single modest diamond. "Will you marry me?" Penelope's vision blurred with tears. "Yes. Yes. Of course, yes." Donovan stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a passion that made her forget everything except the feeling of his arms around her and the knowledge that she was loved. They were married in November, in the small church in Pueblo with half the town in attendance. Rosa had helped Penelope sew a dress of ivory silk, simple but elegant, and Penelope wore wildflowers in her hair. Miguel walked her down the aisle since she had no family of her own, and when she reached Donovan's side and saw the look in his eyes, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work and happiness. Penelope threw herself into building the ranch alongside her husband, and the rocking eye continued to grow. They added a foaling barn and expanded the training facilities. Penelope's business acumen combined with Donovan's skill with horses made them a formidable team. In the spring, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Donovan's joy was so profound that it made her cry, and he became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more and work less. Rosa was thrilled and immediately began knitting baby clothes. In December of 1883, Penelope gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named David Michael Irving. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the moment Donovan held him, Penelope knew their son would grow up surrounded by love. But life on a ranch was never easy, and challenges continued. In the summer of 1884, a drought struck the region. Water became scarce, and they had to make difficult decisions about which animals to keep and which to sell. Penelope worked long hours managing their dwindling resources, while Donovan and the men dug new wells and hauled water from increasingly distant sources. One night, as they sat together on the porch after putting David to bed, Donovan pulled Penelope close. "I know this is hard," he said. "But we will get through it." "I know we will," Penelope said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We have been through worse." "That we have," Donovan agreed. He kissed the top of her head. "You know what I think about sometimes? That day I rode up to your wagon on the trail. What if I had just kept riding? What if I had not stopped to help?" "But you did stop," Penelope said softly. "You stopped and you changed my life." "We changed each other's lives," Donovan corrected. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your wagon carried secrets from your past, but your future started right here with me, and what a future it has been." Penelope smiled, turning her face up for a kiss. What a future indeed! The drought eventually broke and the ranch recovered. They had learned valuable lessons about water management and diversification, and they implemented changes that would help protect them from future hardships. In 1886, Penelope gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Patricia Rose after Penelope and Rosa. She was a tiny, fierce thing from the moment she was born, with her father's determination and her mother's intelligence. The family continued to grow and thrive. David showed an early interest in the horses, following his father everywhere and mimicking his every move. Patricia was equally fearless, learning to walk by pulling herself up on corral fences and demanding to be put on horseback before she could even properly sit up. Through the years, Penelope never forgot where she had come from or how close she had come to losing everything. The trial of her former employers had happened in 1883, and she had returned to Kansas to testify. Donovan had gone with her, holding her hand through the entire ordeal. The men had been convicted and sentenced to long prison terms, and Jonathan Mitchell had been freed and compensated for his wrongful imprisonment. He had written her a letter of gratitude that she kept in a special box with her other treasures. Miguel and Rosa remained with them, becoming like family. When Carlos married a local girl named Maria in 1885, they built a small house on the ranch property, and Maria became Penelope's close friend. Frank, the hired hand, proved so reliable that Donovan eventually made him a partner in the training operation. The Rocking Eye became known throughout Colorado for the quality of its horses and the integrity of its owners. Donovan's reputation for honest dealing and Penelope's sharp business sense made them prosperous. They bought the adjacent land Donovan had dreamed of and expanded their operations. They added cattle, built a new house with more room for their growing family, and became pillars of the Pueblo community. In 1889, Penelope gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and Theodore. The household became even more chaotic, filled with the sounds of children laughing, horses neighing, and the constant activity of a working ranch. Penelope sometimes felt exhausted, but she was never anything less than grateful for the life she had built. One evening in the summer of 1890, Penelope stood on the porch of their home, watching Donovan teach 7-year-old David how to work with a young horse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Patricia was playing with the twins in the yard while Rosa watched over them. From the barn, she could hear Miguel and Carlos finishing up the day's work. Donovan looked up and caught her watching. He said something to David, then walked over to the porch, his stride as confident and easy as it had been the day she met him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, climbing the steps to stand beside her. "About how different my life could have been," Penelope said honestly. "If you had not stopped that day on the trail, if you had not offered me a chance, if you had not loved me." Donovan wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his solid warmth. "I think about that sometimes too," he admitted. "But then I realize it was not just chance. You were brave enough to take a stand for what was right, even when it cost you everything. You were strong enough to start over in a strange place, and you were open enough to let me in when you had every reason to keep your guard up." He kissed her temple. "That is not luck, Penelope. That is who you are. We make a good team," Penelope said. "The best," Donovan agreed. They stood there together as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear. David called out a question about the horse, and Patricia demanded someone come push her on the swing. The twins started squabbling over a toy. It was noisy and chaotic and perfect. "Your wagon carried secrets from your past," Donovan murmured, repeating the words he had said to her that first night they had confessed their feelings. "But your future started right here with me." "And what a future it has been," Penelope said, echoing her own words from years before. She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Donovan Irving. I love our life, our family, everything we have built together." "I love you too," Donovan said, and kissed her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding day. As the years continued to pass, the ranch grew from strength to strength. The rocking eye became a legacy that would be passed down to their children and grandchildren. But more than the land or the horses or the financial success, what Penelope and Donovan built was a foundation of love and trust that would sustain their family through whatever challenges life might bring. David grew up to be a skilled horseman like his father, eventually taking over much of the training operation. Patricia surprised everyone by developing a talent for breeding, carefully selecting bloodlines to improve the quality of their stock. The twins, though identical in appearance, had different interests. Thomas loved the business side of ranching and worked closely with his mother on management, while Theodore became fascinated with veterinary medicine and went to study in Denver before returning to provide care for the ranch animals. In 1895, when Penelope was 36 and Donovan 40, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together everyone who had touched their lives. Miguel and Rosa, now grandparents themselves through Carlos and Maria's children, told embarrassing stories about the early days. Marshall Carter, who had become a friend over the years, traveled from Denver to attend. Even Mrs. Chen from the Arkansas Rose Hotel came, bringing a beautiful quilt she had made as a gift. During the party, Donovan pulled Penelope aside into the quiet of the ranch office where she had first told him she loved him. He held her close, swaying gently to the music that drifted in from outside. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The choices you made, running, coming here, all of it." Penelope did not even have to think about her answer. "Never, not for a single moment. Everything I went through brought me here to you, to this life. I would do it all again if it meant ending up where I am now. Even the hard parts," Donovan pressed. "The fear, the running, the secrets, even those," Penelope confirmed, "because they taught me what I was capable of. They taught me to be brave. And they brought me to a man who saw past my mistakes and my fear to the person I could be." She cupped his face in her hands. "You gave me more than just a future, Donovan. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I did not think I deserved it." "You always deserved it," Donovan said fiercely. "You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that you chose me." "Choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made," Penelope said and kissed him. They returned to the party hand in hand, and Penelope looked around at all the faces she loved. Her children, running wild with the other ranch kids. Miguel and Rosa, who had become the parents she never had. Her friends and neighbors, the community that had embraced her. And Donovan, always Donovan, her anchor and her joy. The years continued their steady march forward. There were more children born on the ranch, grandchildren who carried on the Irving name and the values Penelope and Donovan had instilled. There were challenges too: harsh winters, market downturns, illnesses and losses. But through it all, the family remained strong, held together by the love and example of the couple at its center. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Penelope and Donovan stood together on that same hilltop where he had proposed to her all those years ago. They were older now, with silver threading through their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of hard work and laughter. But when Donovan took her hand, Penelope felt the same thrill she had that first day on the trail. "Look at what we have built," Donovan said, gesturing at the ranch spread below them. It had grown enormously from those early days. New buildings, expanded pastures, herds of horses and cattle bearing the Rocking Eye brand. "Look at what we have built," Penelope agreed, but she was not looking at the ranch. She was looking at her husband, at the man who had offered her a future when all she had was a past. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for letting me," Donovan replied. He pulled her close, and they stood there together as the sun set on one century and rose on another. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. And that night, as they lay in their bed in the house they had built together, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch settling in for sleep, Penelope thought about that frightened woman on a wagon, carrying secrets and fear. She thought about the cowboy who had offered her something she had never dared hope for. "Your future starts right here with me," he had said, and what a glorious future it had been. What a perfect, imperfect, challenging, joyful, love-filled future they had created together. As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, Penelope Hartford Irving smiled, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, with the man she loved, in the home they had built, living the life she had never dared to dream. The wagon that had carried her secrets was long gone, broken down for spare parts years ago. But the future she had found, the future that had started with a simple offer of help on a dusty Colorado trail, that future continued to unfold in ways more wonderful than she could have ever imagined. And they lived happily, surrounded by love and family and the land they cherished, for all the days of their lives.